Welcome back, y'all. Welcome to today's video. As always, completely unscripted. Of course, I got my usual cigarette, and let's begin. We're gonna talk about something that you probably don't expect. Because as far as I'm seeing on Instagram and as well as, X and other social media platforms, this is extremely unpopular amongst most of the people around the world. Notwithstanding the explicit takeover by the woke, right woke or left woke, you know, of these platforms. But I'm gonna give you what you actually wish for. Sorry, but I gotta close a couple of pages on my computer because I'm opening a document that probably you're gonna review yourselves after I read it to you. But before anything else, I'm gonna start with the introduction. You gotta start to see the European Union and Europe as a whole as the actual enemy, not the people. I'm not giving you the anti-Western narrative. Mind you, this is the most pro-Western narrative that I'm gonna give you. You gotta start seeing the European Union as the actual enemy within this new geopolitical world. How come? How come a European, an Italian citizen, by the way, because Sardinia is part of Italy, right? So I'm part of the European Union. According to European standards, I'm a European citizen. How come a European citizen is speaking about treating the European Union as the enemy? Well, the explanation is very simple. The European Union has been taken over since the very beginning. Most of the countries that rule the European Union are pro-totalitarianism and have always been pro-totalitarianism. Some of these leading countries, like my own, Italy or Germany, they were the leading dictatorships in World War II, the ones that dragged down the population through a black hole from which we are still far away from getting out. The same countries that started and conducted the Holocaust, as well as other genocides like the genocide of the Serbs, the Samudaripen, the genocide of the Romani, and other extermination campaigns against even other European groups. But that is out of today's argument. That is out of today's topic. I don't want to digress. Maybe I'm gonna talk about these things in another video soon. Don't know if I'll publish it on Patreon, under payroll, or here. Not because I don't want y'all to, document yourselves about these things, but it's just because that topic is very long and I need actual effort to put into in order to make it. At any rate, as I was saying before, the European Union has always been the head of the snake. Even more so than the Soviet Union. But that's because the European Union has always been pro-Soviet. Maybe not the European Commercial Committee right? The EEC. That maybe was not. But if you think about the fact that some of the countries that are present in the European Union have been dragged out of the Warsaw Pact through sheer force, like Italy itself, maybe you're going to start understanding that these people, not the citizens, not the individuals living in the EU, mind y'all, not the citizens in the EU, not the people who reside in European countries, the governors. These individuals, they have their own agenda. And maybe you're going to start understanding that that agenda goes openly against the core foundation of individual rights and classical liberalism. The very foundations upon which, for instance, the United States of America have been founded upon. Right? The European Union is a collectivist effort to transform Europe, which is a melting pot of different nations that have very few things in common, actually, with one another, into a communist version of the United States of America. Precisely a Soviet-shaped one. Now, they're changing since the Soviet Union has been, dismantled in 1991. They're looking at China, and they're taking the Chinese model as an example. The one country, two systems model, which is a stakeholder fascio-communist model. As I said on the last video yesterday, fascism and communism are not opposite ideologies. And now I'm gonna clarify it to you. Fascism and communism are two faces of the same coin. They are the two churches of the Gnostic religion. And they are rivals because they are rebels in the takeover of the Gnostic religion. Much like the Catholics and the Orthodox were rivals in the Middle Ages when it came to the takeover of Christendom, right? This is fascism and communism for you. Here, I got the document that proves to you that the European Union is openly against individual rights. This is the Ventotene Manifesto, and it was written down in August 1941. So I'm going to read by my computer. I'm going to read through the document so you can understand what I'm trying to get across. First paragraph goes, the crisis of modern civilization. Modern civilization has posed as its own foundation the principle of liberty, according to which man should not be just a mere instrument of others, but an autonomous center of life. With this code at hand, we decided to start a grandiose process. Hear the language, grandiose. They're already talking about transformation. Whenever they talk about grandiosity, they talk about transformation, which is a Gnostic principle. A grandiose historical process, you see? Here you got a communist understanding of history. On every single aspect of social life that don't respect it. First, it has been affirmed the equal right of all the nations to organize themselves in independent countries. Each people recognized in its own characteristics, whether they be ethnic, geographic, linguistic, or historical, had to find itself in the country's organism, in the organization of the state, modeled uh, on its own accord, according to its particular conception of political life, the tool to satisfy in the best way its own needs, independently of foreign interventions. The ideology of national independence has been a potent tool of progress. It has surpassed the tribalisms, in a sense, of vast solidarity against oppression by foreign dominations. And here you hear the post-colonial language, post-colonialism, foreign dominations, oppressions, right? It has eliminated many of the incidents that put an obstacle against circulation of men and trade. It has extended within its territory, within the territory of each and every single state, to the population, to the less wealthy populations, the institutions and the laws of the populations that were more civilized. This, though, brought within itself the germs of imperialism. As I said before, this is a communist document molded upon post-colonial language that our generation has seen become gigantic until the formation of totalitarian states and the explosion of the two world wars. The nation nowadays not anymore is it considered the historical product of the common shared life among men, who come into a greater uniformity of costumes and aspirations through a long process, have found in their state the most effective form to organize a collective life. Collective upon based upon the fundamental teachings of communism, within human society as a whole. Instead, it became a divine entity, an organism that has to think only for its own existence and its own development, without in any way taking into consideration the will of domination on others, and how these other people could, feel it. Absolute sovereignty of national states has brought to the will for dominations upon others and considers its own vital space. Here they're trying to make you think that nationalism and patriotism literally naturally brings to Lebensraum, National Socialist vital space, which, by the way, again, it's a Marxist concept applied to a quote-unquote nationalism, but you also find it within Islam. So let's jump back. Absolute sovereignty of the national states has brought the will for dominations upon others and considers its own vital space within its own vital space more and more vast territories that permit them to move freely and ensure the means of existence without depending on others. This will for domination could not acquiesce without the hegemony of the state, of the strongest states, onto other vassals. As a consequence, the state, from being the protector of civil liberties of its citizens, has become the owner of subjects, which are mandated to serve it with all their faculties to render the maximum warring effort, the greatest um, efficiency in battle. Even in peaceful periods, which are seen as pauses in preparation for inevitable new wars, new conflicts, the will of the military classes has predominated in many countries upon that of civil citizens, the civil classes, rendering more and more difficult the functioning of the laws of these free political entities. School, science, production, administration are especially directed at enhancing the potential for war. Mothers have been considered factories for soldiers, and as a consequence, they have been rewarded with the same criteria upon which, usually at the zoo, you reward beasts. Children were educated upon since a tiny age to weaponry and the usage of weapons and hate against strangers, loathing the stranger, the foreigner. Freedoms, individual freedoms, have been reduced to nothing from the moment in which everybody was militarized and continually called to duty, to military duty. Wars, repeating wars, have made it mandatory to leave family, the jobs, every single thing that was owned, and sacrifice life itself for the goals that nobody understands the value for. And in a few days, they destroyed results of decades of efforts that were put into enhancing collective wealth. Totalitarian states are those that have realized in the most coherent way the unification of all strengths, actuating the maximum autarky and centering, and therefore they have been proven to be the most adept organisms for the current international environment. It is only required that a nation could, you know, move beyond and towards a more accentuated totalitarianism to be followed by other nations, which are drawn to the same uh, to the same path by the will to survive. And this is only the first paragraph. The whole document is like 14 pages long, so I'm not going to read it as a whole. By the way, on the first paragraph, you already hear the socialist lingo. You already hear the socialist the socialist vocabulary by using, collective effort and demonizing nationalism. Now, it ain't like I'm a pro-totalitarian person. Of course, I'm not. It's as far away from my ideals as communism would be. But communism is, in and of itself, totalitarian. The difference is that these totalitarian regimes that they are talking about are, the National Socialists and the fascist ones, which are, as I said before, the other side of the same beast that we're trying to fight. If you read through the whole document, you understand that this whole concept upon which this document was written is socialist. It is the same concept that brought fascism in Italy and National Socialism in Germany. The only difference is that they want to make it into an international socialism, the same way the Soviet Union was. But they are not going for industrial communism like Soviet Union. They don't have the capabilities to go for industrial communism because there are very little resources in the European Union. The problem is that they want to degrow the European Union and make up a socialism based on kinship, which sounds an awful lot like National Socialism, by the way. Maybe not ethnic kinship, but national kinship. Make it into a European nation which has never existed. Now, pardon me for being slow with reading, because, I gotta translate it. This document is not present in English. You don't find it in the English language, so I gotta translate from Italian. Maybe you find it in French, because it's one of the official documents of the European Union. But it has to be said, this document was written in 1941, and at that time, the official language of the European community was Italian. Yeah, pretty difficult to think about, given the fact that, Italy was going through a civil war, and that was written by communists who were supposedly funding off the fascists, notwithstanding the fact that they were supporting other fascists like the Chetniks, just because they were against Germany. Now, again, I don't want Hitler. I'm not a national. See, here's the thing. I am a hardcore Zionist. I am a Zionist. I would be brought to a concentration camp, like right off the bat, if the Nazis were in power nowadays. I'm not a white Aryan, because my people have never been considered neither white nor Aryan, according to the same ideology that Hitler used to follow, which was based upon the ideas of Helena Blavatsky and Guido von List. My people, despite being like the oldest European people alive to this day, are not seen as actual Europeans. We're seen as Semites that came to Europe before the actual Aryans, who, according to Helena Blavatsky, came from the north. They came from a legendary land called Thule. And therefore, we have a lower intellectual and spiritual ability. We are not one of the root races. We are like Lemurians, Atlanteans, Not too sure about that, but we're closer to Jews, Lebanese, and other peoples, according to them. Even though, like, genetically speaking, all of the people in the Mediterranean, they come from the same genetic pool, whether it be Jewish, Italian, Sardinian, Armenian, Portuguese, Coptic, Albanian, Druze. We come from the same genetic pool. The Anatolian Neolithic farmers, they were the ancestors of every single people within the Mediterranean Sea. And that is the major difference that separates us from, the Nordic countries, which have more of a step ahead at mixture. But that is something that refers to genetics and genomics, and I don't want to talk about that. This is just to debunk Helena Blavatsky and Guido von List, who are, by the way, Nordicists. Nordicism was one of the ideas that were very popular in the 19th century. And these people were occultists. They did like seances and invoked spirits and all that shit. Completely irrational and diabolical, to say the least, in my opinion. Being a believer, I'm a born again Christian, to be honest. To be honest with y'all. And I'm slowly trying to bring back the Sardinia Metropolitan Church, which used to be the church that Sardinians had before becoming Catholic. But that is a topic for another time. Now, pardon. I read to you the first paragraph of this 14 pages document. I urge you all to read through it, through the whole of this manifesto, and compare it to what's been written by Karl Marx and Lenin, specifically the Communist Manifesto and what has to be done. And you're gonna see a lot of parallels. And this brings me back to what I was saying before. The European Union is an enemy of classical liberalism. You'll never see the European Union going for classical liberal causes. Ever. It ain't just being, vehemently against Israel, because Israel is a bastion of classical liberalism. And y'all think that this anti-Semitism that we're seeing in the West, especially in Europe, is organic. It ain't. It's not organic at all. It's contrived. It's completely made up by the very same people that control the EU under payroll. And it's not a conspiracy theory. You can find it. There are deep, half a century old relations between, say, Italy and the Islamic Republic of Iran, since the very foundation of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Because the Italian state, despite nowadays being the most right-wing country in the entirety of the EU, the Italian state was, for most of the time, governed by communists. And these communists were pro-Soviet, and they were the ones that wanted to bring Italy into the Warsaw Pact from the 1940s. Many of the partisans that, fought for the freedom of Italian civilians never did. They didn't fight for the freedom of Italians. There were classical liberal partisans who actually fought fascism. Those who executed Benito Mussolini didn't do it because they wanted to preserve individual liberties. They wanted to execute Benito Mussolini because they were pro-Tito. And this is historical. It ain't a conspiracy theory. This is like history. And Tito was genociding Italians as well as Jews in the Foibe. Ain't nobody gonna be talking about that one, y'all. So they were very communist, and they have always been very communist. They wanted to turn an already established dictatorship into a communist international socialist one, because the fascists, they were all former communists, and they built the Italian totalitarian regime in the same way the Bolsheviks built the Soviet Union. The second country that had the most collectivized industries after the USSR in the 1920s was fascist Italy. Benito Mussolini was the director of L'Avanti, a Marxist newspaper. He picked up the tools of the communists because he was a former communist. He himself was a former communist, and used them in order to collectively nationalize Italy, turn international collectivism into national collectivism, which necessarily had to be imperialist in order to turn it once again into international collectivism. It ain't conservative. It ain't right wing. This is all left wing. This is all woke. Wokety woke, as everybody be saying nowadays. It's in the woke playbook. The reason why the European Union doesn't have much of a conservative basis. The majority of those who are quote unquote right wing in the EU are not conservative. They are not right wing. They are not classical liberals, because Europe never had classical liberals. It never had classical liberalism. The French Revolution was a Gnostic one. Again, the reason for the lack of presence of actual conservatives and actual right-wing people within Europe is because every single time these conservatives try to raise their voices, they get boxed out. They get arbitrarily and willingly boxed out, and it's like an organized effort. So you find yourself within this fake dichotomy, this false dichotomy. Either you go with the woke right, or you go with the woke left, without any actual choice, because these two are the same. Either you go with the woke, or you go with the woke. The other choice, which is like the actual alternative, is you die, or you get your freedoms taken away, one step at a time, just like it happened with COVID-19. There is no way you can still see the European Union as a military ally. They have turned NATO, the North Atlantic Organization, into a subversive committee that goes openly against the United States of America, which are the main founders of NATO. Look at what's happening in Greenland. They are deploying military in Greenland to go against the US, thinking that they're going to defeat the most powerful army in the entirety of the planet. It's all by the playbook. Why are they allowing funding from Qatar and from China? This is all part of the new Silk Road, which is the largest effort, the largest program within the Belt and Road Initiative. And that goes from 2009, actually. It's very old. And it's a means to balkanize the population, as I was, talking about yesterday. It's all done on purpose. none of what you see in the EU is organic. Nothing. Nothing. Zero. And in order to have this plan to be enacted, they brainwash the population. For all the conspiracy theorists who are gonna call me $7,000, there ain't no Jew in here unless we're talking about George Soros, who helped the Hungarian Nazis kill the Jews and send them to Auschwitz. It's got nothing to do with the Jews. This is some bullshit. This is Europeans. This is the EU. The EU, the European government. This plan has been enacted by the European Parliament, the European Central Bank. You want to go against the actual people who are controlling Europe, go against Mario Draghi. Go against those people who gather at Davos to talk about the third leg of the stool. You know, how to hijack religion in order to bring in this new transformative ideology that's gonna strip every European citizen of all their rights. Go against Klaus Schwab. Go against Ursula von der Leyen. Go against Ilaria Salis. These are the people that actually control Europe. Go against Keir Starmer. Quit bullshitting. You want to save Europe? Actually, I bet you don't. This is my call to every European citizen. You want to save Europe? Try and think about the actual truth of the matter. Try and focus on the truth without getting swept by the conspiracy theories that are funded and organized by these very people. Instead of blaming the Jews, the Zionists. Try and think about what your governments are actually doing, because they are the ones to blame. Or else, if you think that there's actually a people that controls you, that means you're retarded and you don't have enough brain capabilities to think for yourselves. And so you gotta react based on what others tell you. And you have to engage, and you must engage because you gotta defeat the enemy. Bullshit. 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 For the foreigners, those who are not European, start thinking about the fact that the European Union is the actual enemy. They are the ones bringing Qatar to the United States of America. Why and how? Because they want to destroy the US. They want to bring out the multipolar world. And the multipolar world is a world where actually there ain't no pole. It's a world controlled by Davos, by the World Economic Forum, and by China. Multipolar world is the world where China has total domination over every other country on Earth. And you want to think about what happens if China dominates every other country on the world. Look at China itself, if you want to have an example. And the woke right, they're exactly the same. They're funded by them. They bring out the very same agenda, Look at Tucker Carlson, parroting Qatar and literally praising Qatar, a country that only has 6 churches, no synagogue, persecutes every single ethnic and religious minority, brings in slaves. Those stadiums the big stadiums that you found during the 2022 World Cup, the World Football Cup, organized by FIFA. And the guys at FIFA, they know those were built by Bangladeshi slaves. Don't think about the Nick Fuentes thing. Yeah, the Jeets deserve it. This is some bullshit. Once again, Nick Fuentes knows nothing about this matter because he doesn't document himself about it. He buys into the very same conspiracy theories that are brought by the very same government that are actually the enemies, aka China, Qatar, and the EU. Even more so than Russia. Russia is a bad actor in the global geopolitical landscape, but Europe is worse. As I said yesterday, I don't justify Russia. I'm not pro Putin. Putin is one of the most anti liberal oligarchs that still exist on Earth. And Alexander Dugin is his ideologue, his mystic. Alexander Dugin is like the new Rasputin. Simple as that. But the European Union is much worse. Maybe on the next videos I'm gonna talk about the very plans that are being enacted. One being about mass migration, but that is under DEI, under diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is literally Karinizatsiya, the way Stalin developed it and implemented it within the Soviet Union. And look at what's been happening, with the Chechens. The Chechens are a product. The Chechen conflict and the persecution of the Chechen is a product of Karinizatsiya. Every single ethnic group in the Caucasus, they have been brought to rebelling against the Russian regime via Karinizatsiya. Because once they enacted their ultra-nationalism, they would have become socialist. And the Europeans think about it the same way. This is why they're bringing out Muslims. And this is why they're funding conspiracy theories and biased media, which triggers anti-Semitism, which, by the way, is the oldest hatred. And this is why y'all are so easy to be manipulated like fucking puppets. Y'all are puppets. If you think that the Jews are the problem, this is literally what these fuckers are doing to you. They're turning you into a puppet, and you're not going against the actual problem, which is the European leaders within the EU. Got it? I hope you did. And look at all the people that are praising China as an example. See how they treated Muslims. They've gotten rid of the Muslims, by deporting 1.2 million people into re-education facilities, which are actually concentration camps where they harvest the Uyghurs for organs. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented. Israel is the actual enemy. Pardon. Y'all are retarded as fuck. So, I gave you the first introduction to the Ventotene Manifesto. I'm gonna read through other documents because I want y'all to understand what's going on, the truth of the matter. And I also vented, and I gave you like the actual explanation of how these people think and how y'all are becoming puppets of the very same regime you think you're going against. Next time, think twice and stop engaging on social media. Get off the fucking Instagram and get off the TV. Go out, touch grass, go for a walk. Because this world, it ain't for the likes of y'all. And start thinking for yourselves. Peace.